All right, welcome everyone. I think everyone has been let into our virtual room. Welcome, I'm Tom Snyder. I'm the Executive Director of RIoT, and thank you for joining our event today to talk about mapping the future of King George County. I'll give just a brief introduction, and then we have a few speakers from King George and from Dahlgren that are going to speak, and then we're going to engage the entire audience in an activity as we try and think about what are some of the strengths and opportunities in the region. This program is really initiated initially by Stafford County, your neighbors who are engaged RIoT to look at how do we take a look at this region of Virginia and these partners that we have in Fredericksburg and King George and Stafford and so on, and really drive a new entrepreneurial initiative. How do we unlock the potential of our region? We have a lot of smart people in this region. We have resources in the region. RIoT, our organization, is an economic development nonprofit that focuses on job creation. And we do that through various forms of convening and educating, and we run startup accelerator programs and other kind of small business development resources. And through a grant provided by Go Virginia, Region 6, there was some funding that has enabled a number of this style of meeting to be held throughout the region. When all of this started, we thought we'd be meeting in person. Of course, we're unfortunately not doing that today, but we're glad that you were able to join online. We've had kind of a virtual town hall in Stafford already, as well as some technology discussions around cybersecurity and other kind of opportunity areas in the region. We've got a plan for an event coming up in Fredericksburg in February, so stay on the lookout for that. But we're really excited to be in King George today. You see there's a brief agenda here. We're gonna go through a few conversations, both from the public sector advising King George government, from King George County itself, and then from the Dahlgren Naval Surface Warfare Center. After that, we're going to ask all of you that are online to participate in what's called a SWOT analysis: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. All of this data and the feedback that we hear today is going to be gathered and collected with the other data that we've gotten from other meetings around the region to kind of develop out what is the plan towards the future. And in each of you that have been participating today will have an opportunity to kind of see the future work and things, but we want you to understand this isn't just an event to come and listen to some speakers and then go back home, but hopefully something that generates some energy, generates some action, and creates some forward momentum for the region. So with that, I'm really excited to introduce Ian Fox. Ian is a board member of the King George County Economic Development and Tourism Office. And Ian, I'm going to hand it off to you to make some opening remarks.
Thank you, Tom. Good afternoon, everyone. And thank you for joining the workshop on mapping the future of King George County. I'm Ian Fox, and I'm a volunteer board member of the Economic Development Authority of the county, which is charged with promoting King George as an attractive investment destination. I don't have historical ties to King George. In fact, my family and I moved here from Singapore, where I've been working for several years. Since my work now allows me to be located pretty much anywhere, we chose to settle in King George because it provides that special balance of proximity to DC and Fredericksburg, while still being a place where rural values run deep, where we can enjoy easy access to beautiful waterways, good schools, and where property values are rising due to King George's key location between two major transportation corridors that are currently undergoing massive upgrades. Specifically, this includes the expansion of the Harry Nice Bridge over the Potomac from 2 lanes to 4 lanes on Route 301, and the expansion of I-95, along with adding more train tracks between DC and Richmond and increasing the speed on those tracks. All 3 of these projects, multi-billion-dollar projects, are going along concurrently, and King George is positioned neatly right in between these infrastructure upgrades that come along only once in a generation. Right now, King George is at a very key point in its evolution. And again, this is due largely to these major transportation upgrades going along on either side of us. So we want to chart a course for our county where commercial and residential growth do not come at the expense of our rural environment, but to some degree come because of our natural environment and our proximity to larger, more heavily developed municipalities. So IT, e-commerce, cloud data centers, and STEM jobs, in essence, are what we want to promote here in King George. Agriculture has historically been the bedrock of our local economy. In fact, there's a farm across the street from my house that's been in operation since 1720. For the last 100 years or so, the key economic driver in the county has been the Dahlgren Naval Surface Warfare Facility. And in more recent decades, things like sand mining, coal-fired power generation, and landfill operations have been significant components of the economy. But going forward, our aim is to preserve and enhance economic activity from Dahlgren and from STEM industries while phasing out some of the things that are not truly sustainable over the long term. So, for example, the county's coal-fired power plant actually will be decommissioned in 2021, and it's expected to be largely replaced by a utility-scale solar farm. We're down to just, I believe, just one remaining sand mine in the county, which is in late stage production, and hopefully it will not be extended too much further. So when we talk about mapping the future of King George County, that future is less and less about invasive industries and more about higher tech, sustainable development that can flourish alongside our beautiful natural environment. That's our goal. And now, to tell you more about that, it's my pleasure to introduce our next speaker, the Director of the King George County Economic Development and Tourism Authority, Mr. Nick Miner. Nick?
Yes, thank you. Yep. Thank you, Ian. I really appreciate your introduction. And I want to thank Tom and the RIoT team, as well as staff for County Economic Development, Tourism, and their EDA. I really appreciate you guys' support and collaborating on this. Next slide, please. So what I want to do today is sort of provide you guys with an overview of King George County, just a basic understanding of the geography and some of the assets, as well as some of the activity that we have going on in the county. Next slide, please. So King George County is approximately 179 square miles and has an estimated population of about 26,500 people. According to an analysis done by NACO, King George GDP, or gross domestic product, is estimated to be around $2 billion. That's impressive for a county of our population, and we hope to see it grow. From a quality of life perspective, King George is filled with natural beauty. It borders two major rivers, the Potomac and the Rappahannock, and creates great opportunities for tourism as well. And we hope to capitalize off of those moving on in the future. Next slide, please. From a demographic perspective, 13% of our residents have a graduate or professional degree. 34% of our residents have a bachelor's degree. And unlike other rural counties, we are getting younger every year, with 26% of our population being millennials, and that number is increasing by 1% every year as well. King George is home to the region's largest employer, NSF Dahlgren. Dahlgren recently celebrated its 100-year anniversary and has been the Surface Navy's testing ground and innovation hub for decades. Dahlgren is a major economic driver in our county, and as you can see, has a major impact on our demographics. You'll hear from our keynote speaker, Mr. Black, elaborate on NSWC's contributions and their future later. Next slide, please. In comparison to other rural communities, King George has good broadband connectivity. This is primarily due to our partners at Atlantic Broadband. They've been able to cover the majority of the residents within the county, and we thank them for their service to our community. However, that doesn't mean that everyone is covered. As we all know, providing broadband to rural communities and households can be very costly. In fact, there are several neighborhoods, roads, and nearly entire districts that are not covered in King George. And I've listed some of the challenges that we sort of face here in our community. It's mostly, I would say, the contributing factors to this is population density, definitely some topography issues, and then just a lack of community anchors overall. Next slide, please. So recently, the county was awarded, or I should say selected to participate in Dominion Energy's rural broadband pilot. And in March, the Board of Supervisors executed an MOU with Dominion, All Points Broadband, and Northern Net Cooperative to provide broadband to almost every underserved home in the county. This project stems from Dominion Energy's rural broadband pilot and their future plans to update their grid infrastructure with fiber optic cable. This fiber will run down Dominion's transmission lines or trunk lines through the heart of King George, and this project is designed to capitalize off of the investment by branching off those existing lines and delivering internet connectivity to underserved homes. This project is currently being reviewed by DHCD and will need to be approved by the State Corporation Commission. And if approved, the estimated timeframe for this completion of this project is the fall of 2021. Next slide, please. So this is essentially a map of that project area. The red line is the red lines are the trunk lines, the green area is the coverage territory, and the white lines are the distribution lines that are coming off of the trunk line that will supply the homes. And as you can see, it's going to cover the majority of the northern neck, mostly the southern portion of this area. Is going to touch probably the most rural area of our county, which is the Shiloh district. And it'll actually cover, I believe, the district that Ian is in as part of the James Madison district. And then that fiber line will be extended up towards the Eagle Bay area and the James Monroe district of King George County. Next slide, please. So quality of life. The next thing I'd like to hit on is quality of life. People move to King George for two reasons: quality of life and work. Either you work in King George and want to be closer to your job, or you enjoy the rural character of the county and the peace and quiet it affords you. A rural lifestyle is something that resonates with me as well. I grew up near Lake Anna in Spotsylvania County and then moved to Orange County, where I graduated from high school. So I understand the draw a rural community can have on someone. But when a community like ours, King George, has so many economic development assets built into its landscape and location, it makes it difficult to slow development of any kind. So I'd ask that today that we look for solutions on how we can preserve the things that we enjoy about our community, but also be a business and development friendly county as well. Next slide, please. So for those of you that don't know, I got my start in economic development profession at the Fredericksburg Regional Alliance at the University of Mary Washington. One of the most important things I learned while I was there was that collaboration is hard, but necessary. When we collaborate, it's typically for something that will have a greater impact that benefits the entire region. I strongly believe that a rising tide lifts all boats, and collaboration with our regional partners and neighbors benefits King George. So I encourage our neighboring localities, as well as our regional partners, to reach out to us to support economic development initiatives and ideas that not only benefit our community, but our region as a whole. So, and with that said, I'd like to introduce Mr. Alan Black. He is the corporate communications director for NSWC Dahlgren division. NSWC is the largest tenant on NSF Dahlgren. And Mr. Black, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Nick, and good evening, everybody on the internet and everywhere, wherever you may be tonight. As Nick said, the Naval Surface Warfare Center, Dahlgren Division, we've been in King George County since 1918. So we're at 102 years now, delivering naval innovation for the fleet of today and the fleet of tomorrow. Interesting side note, we originally were the Naval Ordnance Center, and we were up at Indian Head. So little known fact is from about 1918 to about 1934, we were actually called Lower Station Indian Head. So we were part of the Naval Surface Warfare Center up at Indian Head. And then in the 30s, they broke that off, and today we're NSWC Dahlgren Division. Our commanding officer is Captain Casey Plew, and our technical director is Mr. John Fiore. And together they oversee the almost 8,000, and that's a combination of contractor and government employees that make up NSWC Dahlgren Division. There's about 12, 13,000 total on naval support activity South Potomac overall. And as Nick said, we're the major tenant there. Next slide, please. Now, we are part of the overall Naval Research and Development Establishment. As you can see, there are several locations, primarily in the East Coast and some in the southwestern portion of the United States. And our sister warfare center out there in the middle, which is Crane, at NSWC Crane in Crane, Indiana, and then a couple of sites down in Florida. But for the most part, we're clustered in this actual Fredericksburg region, DC region. You'll see several dots right around there, such as the Naval Research Laboratory, ourselves, Carter Rock up by Bethesda, and then Indian Head, to name a couple of others. So it's important to know, Dahlgren is not the only warfare center. We each have focus areas, if you will. And for Dahlgren, that is the surface warfare. We're most well known probably by many of you for what we did for a very long time here, which was test and proof 16-inch naval guns. So that boom that you heard go down the Potomac River was often Dahlgren Division firing from the gun line. We've migrated a little, you could say probably actually a lot from that to where we're going to the future. Next slide. And it's kind of what I want to talk to you about today. So this happens to be our 2021 to 2025 5-year strategic plan, which we literally have just debuted this past month. So it kind of sets the stage for everything the Dahlgren Division will do and kind of where we're headed for the next 5 years. So we'll take a moment to kind of go over some of those. We have basically in our plan with our 5 strategic goals. The overall mission of the division is we deliver warfare systems to protect our nation and defeat our adversaries. And then the vision is that we design, develop, and integrate technologically superior 21st century warfare systems. One of the things you'll hear me talk about a lot tonight, it's, we talk about the future, and you heard both Nick and Ian touch on broadband issues, for example. And one thing you'll notice on this slide is very heavily into that area, right? In terms of technology and the digital future. We have 5 strategic goals, as I said. The first goal is our technical thrusts. So that's where our technical work focuses on. The second goal, interesting enough, is IT modernization, followed by workforce development, communication, and then finally business goals. So let me talk a little bit about each one of these specifically. On the technical thrusts, we have 5 thrust areas. These are the 5 main components of what we are looking to focus our resources on over the next 5 years. The first one is intelligent automation. So that should be no surprise to anybody. Artificial intelligence. We have it in our home. Who's got Alexa at home? For a few, for probably 2 years after it came out, I was kind of not looking forward to having Alexa in the house. But then as Alexa started to pop up in my house, rather convenient to tell her to turn the air conditioner on and turn the lights off and all that. And so we've got got Alexa on each floor in the house now, which is kind of interesting in itself. But all that automation is coming to us. So, as part of the division's thrust area here is we're trying to figure out, okay, how can we take all these systems and various AI that's in these systems and all this data and automation and bring it together and actually have it be useful. That's the intelligent automation piece. The next one is the software engineering revolution. You'll hear the term software factory come along with that, which is basically a lot of people working on code, right? How do we take advantage of all this code that everybody's working on? Next thrust theory is digital engineering. Of course, you're starting to see the trend here, right? So everything is digital/cyber, if you will. Next, hypersonic weapons advancement. So that's a bit of a turn, right? We've heard the velocity projectile that we have at Dahlgren and work like that, compared to the shells that we would fire outside a 16-inch gun. So again, it's a shift in the type of weapons we use, the type of projectiles. And then finally, information superiority. What do we do with all that data that we have? How do we harness that data, and how do we analyze the data to come to a useful conclusion with whatever data it is we're analyzing? So those are the technical thrusts that we're looking at. Of course, I mentioned we had 5 goals. The next one's IT modernization. I think that's a challenge across the board, no matter where you're at, because the information technology seems to outpace our ability to purchase it. Not only that, but to know it even exists. So you have this constantly evolving set of IT demands. And the pandemic has taught us one thing, and that is that this is probably one of the more mission critical areas, right? We didn't maybe we weren't necessarily ready when we started the pandemic to all be teleworking, but now we're all, even this meeting tonight, we're all on a Zoom call from the comfort of our homes or offices or wherever you might be, and we're able to collaborate over this network. So again, IT modernization becomes kind of a big piece of all this, and all these goals, mind you, work in tandem, really, to meet that mission and vision that we have. The next goal, of course, is workforce development, and that is key. It's building the future workforce that maintains the mission readiness of the future Navy through strategic planning, hiring, and development. It's not, I used to think it was pretty fairly simple, right? You interview somebody, hire them, you start the job. Well, you have to go recruit, and you almost have to recruit at an early age, especially for the science and technology areas, right? So we have a very, very robust STEM program. If we go into the schools in King George, Stafford, and other areas, to try to get the elementary and high school students interested in the science and technology careers. It's not something you can kind of learn overnight. So the quicker the younger, I guess, we can get somebody interested in that, it can start that path to become a mechanical engineer or cyber engineer of the future, if you will. But that takes a very long time. So workforce development is a key goal that we have. Next one is, of course, one of the ones that I'm dealing with, and that's communication. We want to be able to communicate the right information to the right people at the right time. So what does that mean? Well, part of our charge, and in fact, the majority of my job is to make sure that the American public knows that we're good stewards of the taxpayer's dollar, and where it is that your money is going and what we're doing. So there's a lot of transparency that we bring to the table in my particular office, communication shop. And it's important to kind of have this feedback loop, if you will. So events like this, we attended an event with the Fredericksburg Regional Alliance a few weeks ago. It's all part of a larger ecosystem, right? So as Nick said, collaboration is hard, but it's necessary. Well, we look at it as an ecosystem in which we are all partners, if you will, and we have to work together to benefit the area. Broadband may not seem like a big important deal, but broadband is an important deal. Why? Well, it could attract more people to the area. And of course, then that helps us with workforce development and other issues. So also, as Nick said, you have to do the smart growth, right? You want to preserve the parts of the county. I would love to move down. I'm up in Prince William County, as Nick says, one of the more populous counties, if you will. And I've been living up here about 20 years, but workforce development is really tied to how the community has developed over the years. And lastly, the business goal. The business goal is to provide that effective, efficient, and modern business solutions. So what does that really mean? Well, we look at it as business rigor. Are we doing the right things? Are our processes efficient? Have we kind of streamlined regulations and policies so that we can get the job done? But going back up to that mission and vision, it's all really tied to being able to feed those two things. So that's kind of a quick overview of where we're going for the next 5 years. And again, the strategic plan has just been released. It will hopefully be up on our public website if you'd like to download it here in a week or two. We're getting ready to put it up there right now. It's a very long, complicated web address, but the best way for you to find it is just to type in Dahlgren Division in Google, and it will take you to the NSWC Dahlgren Division public page, and you'll be able to get the plan from there. Okay, next slide. So as Nick said, we've been around a long time, about 8,000 strong. This is the Dahlgren budget and people slide, so I'm going to spend a little time on here. So our annual budget execution is $1.7 billion. Now keep in mind, we are a working capital fund. So what that means is we don't necessarily have a line item in the president's budget. So we're essentially a business, and we hire our talent out to do research. Again, if you look down here in the economic impact area, you'll see where some of those incoming funds come from. I mean, it's no surprise. We do the majority of work for the Navy and the Marine Corps, followed by the Army, the DoD in general, the Missile Defense Agency, and we have some work for the Air Force. So if you look at it, these are our major customers, and they're kind of who fund us for this $1.7 billion that we get. We are the largest federal research and development employer in the state. An interesting side note, as we look at workforce development, and Nick on his slide had some of the stats of the median income and things like that, and workforce degrees. But when you look at just the microcosm of government employees at Dahlgren, what you'll notice is of our 4,786, 81% of those people are part of the technical workforce. So, going back to that strategic alignment slide, if you think about it, 81% of the people at Dahlgren are working on those things. They're working in those thrust areas. They're working to support that research and development for the future fleet. That's a significant number. So there's not, the other 19%, there's not a lot of overhead there on the support side doing contracting and budget and things like what I do. So you have a very, very, very large portion of the workforce focused on that technical work. And of course, of that technical work, 81% of them, it's kind of interesting, it just worked out that way. 81% of that workforce has a 4-year degree or higher. Bachelor's degrees, 51%, master's, 27%, and 3% with doctoral degrees. That's 142 PhDs that we have. About 1,300 master's degrees and a little over 2,400 bachelor's degrees. So again, a significant amount of intellectual capital, if you will, located in such a small area. We have 4,786 civilians. As I said, we've got about 4,300 contractors, but we are a military base. We are the United States Navy, so we do have 27 military. In fact, our commanding officer is a Navy captain. Of course, there's no surprise the majority of folks live in Virginia, 4,320. We've got 322 employees that live in Maryland. And the rest of the United States is 144, and that deals mainly because we have a location in Virginia Beach. We have some folks out in San Diego, Oklahoma, and DC. So, you've got folks who, I think there's a couple of folks live in Delaware, actually, that come down here. So you've got folks scattered throughout the country. If you look down at our economic impact, and again, this is kind of touching back again on what Ian and Nick discussed, our revenue impact for the area is huge. $967 million of total revenue that we generate. And our employee spending is $707 million. That's quite the chunk of change, right? That's from the Consumer Expenditure Survey for the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Okay, so it's a formula, and you take it. I don't do math in public, well, but basically crunch the numbers, and yeah, over 700 million is what our employees spend. So for King George County in property tax revenue, that generates about $6 million annually. Generates the state about $54 million in state income tax revenue. The average government civilian salary is $108,000 on Dahlgren. And of course, one thing we're very proud of is our small business obligations are $359 million. So again, a significant impact locally from that revenue and the work that we do at Dahlgren. Of course, some of the academic and intellectual impacts, and these are FY19 numbers, because obviously for FY20 and the pandemic, we haven't been able to do some of these things that we usually do. But our outreach for K-12 students was almost a little over 11,337. We spent $650,000 in STEM education funding. That's where we go into schools in the local area, and we help teachers with STEM initiatives, projects, and things like that. We've had 578 patents since 1986. That's a significant number. That's basically brand new things, brand new ideas generated that were patented. One of the more recent ones is Dahlgren Decon, which has come into play here during the pandemic, and it's been a significant use in the pandemic. We've had 10 STEM programs and 54 educational partnerships. We have 26 cooperative research and development agreements, and we have 16 university grants and contacts. Again, we all look at this as part of a larger ecosystem, so it's key that we're all tied in together and collaborating. But as you can see, Dahlgren, we're very well plugged in with the region. And then finally, the last slide. And of course, that's the thank you slide, which means that my time is up. But again, I'd like to thank Nick and Ian and the RIoT team for having us here. We do believe at Dahlgren that being involved in the community is to the benefit of both the Navy and the community, and it's an important partnership. So again, Nick, thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Alan and Nick and Ian. Great kind of background to frame the next part of the discussion, I'd like to introduce my colleague, Caroline Griffin, to join. Caroline is the Events and Operation Manager for RIoT. She and a number of folks on our team and on Nick's team kind of work behind the scenes to pull this together. But with that background that you've just heard from both Nick and from Alan and from Ian, that kind of sets the table now to think about, there are incredible resources and strengths and assets in the region. There are opportunities to do new things, particularly with this exciting new broadband project that's going to connect the rest of the residences across the county and the rest of the businesses across the county. But we're going to run what we call a SWOT analysis. And so those who have not done this before, this is an activity where we think through, like, what are the strengths, the weaknesses, the opportunities and the threats of the region. And we're going to ask you to look at that pretty broadly. And I think we have an example slide here in a moment just to give you a feel for what some of those things might be. But Caroline, if you would please kind of walk us through how this is going to work and how everybody can participate.
Thanks so much, Tom. Thank you, Ian, Nick, and Alan for those great talks. And thank you everyone for being here today. As Tom mentioned, we're moving into the SWOT analysis part of this event. So we really truly want this to be very interactive. We want to hear from you. You guys are the community, and you guys are the ones that we held this event for. So for those who may not be familiar with the SWOT analysis, it's a matrix that really outlines the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So I did pull together a few examples based on a region similar to King George County. So I'll put this just right here so you guys can get a full example before we go into the SWOT analysis. But really how this will work is we encourage you guys to use the chat box. You can use the raise your hand feature, or if you're comfortable, please take yourself off mute and just throw some ideas out there. And what we will do with this, our team is going to take all this data. We have note takers in this event who are taking very detailed notes right now, and I will be capturing this live. So we want this to be very interactive. Again, these are a couple of just examples, but please, we want to hear from you. So we will move on to that part of the event now, and Tom will kind of be our moderator prompter. And I will be capturing those notes. So looking forward to this very interactive part of this event.
All right, and so Caroline's going to be typing into this grid as we're talking. So she pulled out a presentation mode, but hopefully you're still able to read that for those of you that are watching the slides online. As she mentioned before, feel free to use the chat window. If you want to use the raise hand function, I'll watch. That's in the participant list. So if you click on the participants, you'll see there's a button at the bottom of that where you can click raise hand. And as I see people that raise their hand, I'll ask you to unmute yourself. If you would, please introduce yourself and your organization, or and then feel free to throw out those ideas. Because we do have a fairly large audience, we may not get to everyone in person, but we are going to capture everything that's put in the chat window as well as we kind of transcribe everything that goes through today. So we do want to assure everyone that all of your comments are going to be captured. So let's start with the strengths box. So, particularly for those that are either residents already or do business in King George County, or if you're in the greater region, again, we've been engaging with our friends in Stafford and Fredericksburg and around the region. Feel free to throw out some thoughts here about what are those assets, what are those strengths, what are those things that make this region great. So I'm just going to open it here and start to monitor both the chat and participant windows to see what kind of comments that we have. And I'll ask you not to be shy. We will have a Q&A, by the way, at the end of this activity where we'll get into a little bit more discussion, and we'll have an opportunity for all of the audience to ask questions of our speakers and presenters. So we've got some great things coming in on the chat. Great K through 12 schools, so great education system. The 301 bridge expansion certainly has made the county more accessible. That's fantastic. Waterfront, I love it. Shannon Kennedy says location. Shannon, I'll ask you, can you elaborate on that a little bit in the chat, or feel free to unmute?
Oh, well, hey, thanks. I'm Shannon Kennedy. I'm the president at Rappahannock Community College. Just the location, even we talked about, Alan talked about where he lives, you know, that you're so close to Maryland and close to Fredericksburg, and then even close to proximity to the rest of the service region that RCC serves, which is even more rural than King George. So you have lots of options.
Fantastic, thank you. That's great. I see a number of comments here about University of Mary Washington and their campus. More proximity and location notes. Mark Nichols says, you know, this proximity to DC and other DoD facilities and military facilities. There's certainly that concentration here in the area. Easy access to Maryland. Long-term economic stability. That's a great comment, Vaughn. Dahlgren. I'm glad someone, maybe it was obvious having Alan as the keynote speaker today, but absolutely that's a huge strength and asset in the region. Fiber trunk lines running along 301. Absolutely. We have done a lot of work at RIoT in working with smaller communities around this need for broadband to be thought of almost as a fundamental utility, just like water or electricity. You know, you can't educate your children, you can't run a business without good connectivity. So those fiber trunk lines are an absolute asset. Beautiful area for living. Genia, thank you for that comment. Certainly there are not just business assets, but natural assets and quality of life assets. Mark Nichols asked a great question, and anyone is welcome to weigh in. Is I-95 a strength or a weakness? I see a few smiles in the crowd. Maybe. I think it may go in both places. And that's a good point, by the way. There's nothing wrong in this tool for actually the same things to be listed in multiple boxes, because sometimes something like that major highway, there are dimensions that are good and there are dimensions that create challenges. Community outreach. Becky, do you mind elaborating a little bit on what you mean in terms of community outreach as a strength? And if you're trying, there is a way to unmute if you're on a browser. There's a mute button in the lower left corner. Oh, they're great in the chat. If someone needs something, they don't need it for long. If you ask, someone provides. That's great. A collaborative community culture is kind of what I hear there, which is fantastic. Theozotis mentions partnerships, partnerships with Northern Neck, with the Fredericksburg region. It appears it is a collaborative county, despite how hard Nick says it is to do collaboration. That some of this is already happening, which is fantastic. All right, Shannon says she always goes through King George on her way to Maryland or Northern Virginia. A much nicer route to take, perhaps, than just sitting in traffic on 95. Historical significance of the area and tourism potential. Sounds like that maybe is both a strength and an opportunity from William. This is a great list. Obviously, this is more than we're going to fit into the screen as Caroline's typing, but we'll make a much larger format of this before we send it out post-meeting. All right, Warren says Caledon SP. I'm actually not familiar with that myself, but we'll capture it on the list. The state park. Yes, thank you.
Yeah,
thank you.
Caledon is the state park in the county. It's I believe it's labeled a natural habitat.
Okay.
Warren, correct me if I'm wrong. It's probably one of the only ones in the state. It's got beautiful waterfront and these massive trails where you can bike, walk, hike, and I believe tent and stay overnight as well. So
that is on my list to check out next time I am in King George. Okay. Well, that's a huge list of strengths. That's great. Let's move to the right, to the weaknesses box. Here, I'll ask you, we're hopeful we maybe don't have quite as long a list here, but but think about weaknesses, not necessarily as, kind of trying to knock ourselves down, but things that we need to be honest about that are maybe standing in the way of having quite the economic vibrancy that we want, or the quality of life that we want, and so on. By identifying these weaknesses first, then we have the opportunity to prioritize and look at, are there ways to solve those and either flip those weaknesses into opportunities or mitigate them and turn them into strengths. What are some of the weaknesses of the region? Shortfalls in internet access, 100%. And it sounds like from what Nick presented, maybe some rescue is on the way there. Hard to get the word out about events and new businesses, from Becky. Mark Nichols says it's congested from a Richmonder's perspective. That's an interesting comment. A lack of youth employment opportunities, lack of restaurant retail as a tax base. It drives a car culture. You need a car, to get to just about anywhere. Maybe a lack of diversity in housing choices and in retail and shopping. So a couple more comments around restaurants. The cost of water and sewer is listed as a weakness here. I assume that means that the cost is higher than we'd like to be paying. Fragmented infrastructure. That's an interesting comment. Vaughn, can you elaborate on that? Other thoughts? I do think it's interesting. No public transportation yet, less amenities and entertainment and shopping, and a long drive to get to what there is, or perhaps you have to even leave the region for that. Not enough adult gathering places like breweries and such. We will make sure that we get Dahlgren spelled correctly afterwards if there are typos at the speed that we're going here, Nick. Stacy seconds the comment about needing more breweries or other adult gathering places.
Hi, I'm going on. Whoops.
Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, I'm going on video and voice to talk about this because I don't exactly know how to put it in the chat, but I think it's something that needs to be discussed because there is a reputation erroneously that perhaps there is a less sophisticated population in King George, and that is erroneous because of the because of Dahlgren, because of government contracting, because of a lot of people that have moved there and live there from very large populated cities. But for some reason, when people discuss King George, they see kind of a country, rural kind of population sometimes, which is entirely wrong. But there does need to be some branding that would help people understand the sophistication of the area, if that helps.
That's a fantastic comment, Jean. Thank you for making that. I think that's actually, I'm just going to interject my own opinion here, but I think that is a broader problem with smaller communities in rural America overall. We have found, as we've worked in communities in other states, that the people in rural communities are every bit as smart and as creative and entrepreneurial as in Silicon Valley or Research Triangle or these other kind of places that are considered to be highly educated tech spots. And so there is, I think, an interesting branding and just public perception challenge. And so yeah, you could say that the current perception is a weakness. And I think what you just described, there's also a huge opportunity to retell that story.
I'd really like to be frank and say that because of that erroneous reputation, there is also a tinge of concern about the diversity of the area. And that's something that has to be addressed as well.
Thank you for that comment. We will capture both of those. I think the same thing. I think there likely is tremendous diversity, but it's just not always as well understood as it could be.
And that's not just King George, by the way.
Yeah.
There are many other counties that are dealing with the same thing, even in our region. But I can tell you that I have had people visit King George, come back and talk to me about the Confederate flags that they've seen around the county.
Okay. Yeah, no, good. Thank you for that, and for being frank in that comment. While you're chatting, we have a number of new things coming in also on the chat. Water access point is mentioned. I assume that means maybe not enough access points for water sports and things. Warren, if you can confirm that, please. A lack of local media outlets that are really King George focused. That's a great comment. Have the redevelopment zones and areas been identified and properly? That's a question I don't know. Not many cultural outlets for kids, not as much arts, entertainment, dance, music, those kinds of things. Lack of parking for big events like fall festivals. It's hard to know neighbors and businesses when residents are geographically spread and remote employers and business interests are around the state of the county. So some level of isolation maybe that happens when you don't have as dense a concentration of people. Access to rivers and public boat ramps. Yeah, thank you, Warren. I assume that was the comment there. Lack of medical centers or a hospital, Stacy brings forward. That's a good comment. There was one I saw I wanted to ask about. I lost it now, but a comment I think about locals versus maybe people coming into the area. I'm scrolling back through the chat to look for that. The person that made that comment, do you mind kind of elaborating on what you mean by that? We'll wait for
Warren Veazey. That was in response and supporting of what Jeanine has said about the false attitude of, we're a bunch of country hicks out here and trying to, and that sort of, and I guess it's a little bit in the county local government of the good old boys, if you will, of the old families here telling us what we need to do, and not understanding that I think 2/3 of the residents now are moved here and they weren't born in this county. So it's a mind shift of how to support what the people want.
So maybe there's a little bit of a weakness in terms of being more of an inclusive community to both people who've been here a long time and some newcomers perhaps. Great, thank you for that.
Thank you.
Yep. Fantastic. All right, well, let's move over. If anyone does think of additional either strengths or weaknesses, continue to put them in the chat, but actually write, this is a strength or a weakness or something, label it so we can continue to capture them. But let's move down to the opportunity box. And I love it. Jordan's got one out before I even was able to say this. But in terms of opportunities, we're thinking here, what are the things that we could be doing or that wish we had or a change that would create some positive benefit in the region? So Lindsay says local farm events. Jordan says a transportation system that's interconnected to assets such as jobs, businesses, population growth areas, regional corridors, transit. So something that can help make sure that things are interconnected in a transit way. It doesn't necessarily have to be automobile focused, but something that can better connect us. That sounds like a great opportunity to solve one of the weaknesses that we just heard about, geographic disbursement and maybe the inclusion piece and so on. Multi-use fairground, more water or riverfront, a farmer's market, maybe a county, kind of a center like a main street that could be a center gathering place. I love that comment, Ian. Fiber optic, additional comments on fiber optic and infrastructure. Smart farming, great spot for ag tech. I was thinking about that, Amber, as the presentations were being made, that you know, if the historical roots and success and economic success of this county has been largely based on agriculture, that doesn't mean that it needs to change just because we're entering into a world where more and more is technology driven. It may just mean applying some of those technology tools upon the really solid foundation of existing business. So that's a great comment. There are huge branding opportunities for tech jobs and attracting new businesses. 100%. I'll add one that I was thinking about as Alan was giving his presentation, which is that, you know, this is largely a research institution creating all new kinds of inventions and discoveries in those different technical thrusts, and also in workforce development and business and so on. And certainly that creates opportunities for commercialization of some of that work and for new business and things maybe to spin out from Dahlgren. Leverage highly educated technical resources to develop a research center, kind of like Research Triangle. That's a great comment, Vaughn. Lindsay mentions the opportunity that's provided by the fact, you know, maybe comparatively to a lot of other places in the region, that there is open space. There's maybe inexpensive either commercial space or real estate for growth and development. Trains, rivers, and roads for industrial and commercial projects. William asked an interesting question, you know, about, do you direct new growth in creative ways versus putting new growth just anywhere? You know, that speaks a little bit to the urban planning and targeting how to solve some of the infrastructure challenges that Vaughn and others have pointed out. And I think, you know, largely that's what kind of gatherings like this one this evening are about, is hearing from the community, looking at those priorities, at those opportunities, at those challenges, and then coming back with with a thought through plan and strategy to go forward. Bloomia equals strength. Theo put, I'm not as I guess versed in what Bloomia is, Theo. Maybe everyone.
Tom, I can elaborate real quick. So
Yeah.
Bloomia is they're actually a tenant to what's called Horta Group. Horta Group is a large greenhouse in the King George Industrial Park. Bloomia grows tulips. They're very into data and analytics of their facility. It could be a great location to do some type of what's the term now, like high tech ag or
yeah.
It was one of the terms you guys just used. I just missed it. But smart ag, I think, is what Amber said.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, great. Yeah, thank you. Mark Nichols suggests maybe, you know, a larger incubator program like they have in the Fairfax area and maybe some other larger communities. Lori suggests some ideas around, you know, adding to the park system and continuing to make recreational and kind of educational employment a background for both youth and adult employment opportunities, and just a rural healthy lifestyle. Great comments there. I know a number of people are listening in on the phone. I don't know if everyone is able to watch everything in the chat, so I'm going to continue to kind of read these as they come through. And those that are on the phone that might not have the raise hand capability, feel that you are still welcome to unmute yourself and add a verbal comment if you'd like. Alternative energy businesses is an interesting opportunity. You heard the discussion about, you know, a utility scale solar facility that might be in the works. There's certainly a lot of opportunity in the energy space right now. Bloomia tourism, really cool idea, Jamie. Okay. Well, I think we've got a great list forming here. Let's move on to the last box, the threat box of the SWOT. What the threat is really thinking to capture is, we have these opportunities, we have strengths to leverage. What are the things that we need to be on the lookout for that might kind of torpedo our best efforts to drive forward to a more vibrant kind of future for King George. So Vaughn says future BRAC, increased growth of La Plata. So some competing regions. Certainly local competition is often thought of as a threat. COVID impacts to the economy. Absolutely, that's been a threat right now. COVID, by the way, has created some opportunities as well as new kinds of businesses have been able to provide services that COVID has uncovered. Ian says development is at odds with environmental and rural character of the county. That's absolutely a tension. That's a threat. You don't want to lose this quality of life and maybe the cost of the real estate that we talked about, these other things, by overdeveloping too quickly or losing the character that creates a little bit of that division between the people that have lived here a long time and the new people that are coming in. There is a threat to a reduction in government contracts. That's a great comment. There's a threat to COVID impacts on state and county tax revenue. Without a question, that's perhaps not even a threat. That's a reality that COVID has had a significant impact on any kind of local sales taxes, tourism-based taxes, and other kinds of government revenue. More tech and smart devices could equal more cyber attacks. Mark, I agree that that's perhaps a threat, but that may also be an opportunity in terms of cybersecurity solutions. The water table, if the water table continues to drop, that is a threat. How are you protecting the long-term viability of the region by assuring that we have infrastructure in place, as we talked about earlier, in terms of water and sewer and roads and connectivity, but also in terms of long-term water supply? A lack of affordable housing. Yeah, that maybe could be considered a threat if there's a belief that going forward, we're not going to have that. If that lack of affordable housing is already kind of in place of the problem, maybe that's a weakness. Amber says the reference to the old boys club comment, maybe there's a threat of being unable to embrace the history of the county while letting that culture evolve over time. Fantastic. I like that. Maybe everyone's getting a little bit tired. I don't know of the activity, or maybe the opportunities are just so strong that we don't see that many threats. Our threat list is significantly shorter than some of the other boxes, and that's completely okay. Theo says that there's a threat to maintaining youth talent. Do you mean that, Theo, in terms of the threat of young people kind of going through this good K-12 system that was mentioned earlier, and then just leaving the area, that there's an outbound or kind of a brain drain?
Yeah, exactly. Can you hear me, Tom?
Yes.
Yeah, I think, and then Nick just replied to it, maintaining a workforce. I think of workforce development and keeping all the graduating seniors into the region and not to, bigger institutions. We talk about four-year universities going to, Mary Washington and staying in Fredericksburg, but, a lot go to, let's say, Richmond at BCU or Harrisonburg and JMU and Tech. And encouraging them to come back or even keeping them in general is definitely a task for our region and in King George.
Yeah, without question, that is a threat. I'll offer just, we've done a fair amount of work in Danville, Virginia, and in Wilson, North Carolina, some smaller communities that have found that, year over year across their regions, they were having population decline. But then when they made significant infrastructure infrastructure investment in both broadband and economic development kind of resources at an entrepreneurial level versus like large tax breaks for some big employer to come in and run a factory or something. Those kind of efforts in smaller business growth and in providing that technology foundation are the things that in both of their cases reverse the population decline and back into population growth. But yeah, you're right. If the next generation continues to leave, that's a huge threat that needs to be resolved. The landfill, the smell and the visual impact of it may be a detractor from the area, so that's perhaps a threat, maybe even already tending towards a weakness. Thank you, Demetrius. There's a lack of variety in business sectors for the area. I think diversity across all different kinds of measures is critically important. Oftentimes when we think about diversity, we think about kind of demographic diversities and racial diversity and others, but business diversity, entertainment diversity, in all areas, that's really important. So thank you for bringing that forward, Gene. All right. There's a question about whether Amazon and others of these these blue chip companies are going to suck up all the tech talent from Mark. That's certainly a threat. There's already, I know, particularly with our work with Stafford, that there's massive kind of out commute in the morning and in commute in the evening every day from some of these areas as people go to where some of those Northern Virginia jobs are. And that's certainly both a challenge, but an opportunity. We've got a great list, and feel free, anyone who would like to continue to put things into the chat area. What I would like to do at this point, though, is introduce Amber Cobb. Amber is the Director of Partnership for RIoT, focused on the East Coast, and has been instrumental in architecting this entire program. And we really want to open now to just some general Q&A. First of all, you heard from Nick, you heard from Ian, you heard from Alan. If anyone has questions for them specifically, we'd love to address those, and Amber will help moderate. If you have questions for RIoT, certainly we're happy to join as well. But open up some more discussion. Are there key takeaways or thoughts that anyone wants to bring forward? We'll do that for a few minutes, and then again, as I said at the end, we're going to capture all of this. We'll pull everything together, and then when you registered, we have your contact info. We're not going to use it for anything nefarious. We're not selling anybody's emails, any of that kind of thing. But we will make available all of this information later in some form, once it gets collated into a report or a plan or something. So be on the lookout for that. So Amber, I'm going to hand over to you to introduce yourself and moderate the Q&A.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tom. Hi, everybody. I'm Amber Cobb, Director of Partnerships at RIoT. First and foremost, thank you all for participating. This conversation has been amazing, far exceeded all of our expectations. So I'm really grateful for everyone. Like Tom said, our goal is to be able to report out to you what we discovered today. And that'll probably be coming directly from Nick and his EDA team, but we'll get all of that put together based on everything that we've talked about. Now we'd love to open it up to your questions. I have a couple that we got submitted to earlier on, so we'll start with those, but feel free to unmute yourselves, put it in the chat, whatever you're comfortable with. And again, thank you to our amazing speakers, Ian, Nick, Alan, and of course, Tom. Here's a couple of questions for you guys if you're ready. So for our speakers, or for Nick and Ian specifically, how do you explain your county's relative economic performance compared to some of the neighboring counties?
Nick, that may be up your alley, I think.
Yeah, so I've been in the region for 6 years, and I've been working economic development in the region for 6 years. I've only been with the county for a year, and for the past 6 years or 7 years that I've been with the county had only been marketing 2 to 3 economic development properties. Since I've been here, I've been able to add about 11. So we're increasing the site inventory to compete on these projects. That's one reason. I think the second reason is population growth and just workforce in general. And what I mean by that is that the county, in a sense, is getting younger, but it's not doing it rapidly enough. It's not as competitive on the workforce side as I think we should be, or that we could be. There was an article that came out over the summer, and I was asked by the reporter, what about Dahlgren, or what about Dahlgren makes it special? And I said, it's the people. It's the people that work on the base that makes it special. And the more of those people that we can capture in the county, the more competitive we get. I don't have to do a lot of economic development work or marketing if everybody they run into in the county has a bachelor's or a master's degree. The jobs in the economic development projects simply come to you. On top of that, their incomes are so high that, you start putting these people in more dense populations, you start putting them in more dense developments like your townhomes or your apartments. I'm not saying that they want to live like that. I'm just saying that the more population density you get, the retail, the commercial development follow it. So I say it really takes a change of attitude, I think, to that type of development. If you really want to start seeing us compete on economic development projects that really have a significant impact on the county. I'm not saying we're going to land at Amazon, but what I am saying is that you'll start to see economic development announcements with 20 jobs, 40 jobs, 15 jobs, and their engineering jobs, software development jobs, the jobs of the future, right? You also start to see more advanced manufacturing jobs that get announced here, where they're paying $45,000, $50,000 to even $75,000, and they're making very high tech pieces or high tech components. And with that comes the workforce side of it. So now, you have the workforce that's continuing to feed the pipeline, and you start seeing a community that is thriving from every aspect. So that's my answer to that.
Awesome. I think that's some really valid points. And you mentioned community, and that's something I'm really interested in asking this question for. You've got a great group of people who've taken some time out of their day to come to this event and share some thoughts about the area. What role do you think community plays in your economic growth? And how do you leverage it to be a stronger community to promote it?
Is that for me or Ian? I'm sorry.
For both of you.
Go ahead, Ian.
Maybe I'll jump in with part of that anyway. I think there's a tremendous sort of pent up demand for people in the county to be able to have more places to gather and to identify as county residents, so to speak. I mean, we've recently a couple of wineries have opened and expanded with seating areas where they're having music and food trucks and that kind of thing. And they've been great successes just because they're not only are they nice places to go, but there's really no alternative. There's very scarce alternative. So I think I can see from that the community truly is diverse. People are actually coming even from out of the county to participate in these things, which are kind of few and far between. And there's just, I think, tremendous amount of room for growth in that area to capitalize on that pent up demand for more community availability type of things. We really don't have a Main Street in King George. We really don't have a town square focal point in King George. I mean, there's a Walmart shopping plaza and that kind of thing. If you want to count that, I frankly don't count that as a community focal point per se. So community is strong. It's just, I think, a little bit underrepresented in terms of the outlets that we have. And that's an area where, we're cognizant of and hopefully we can address in the near term.
Awesome. Okay, phrase of the century. Nick, you're on mute.
Yeah, I got it. So just to elaborate on it, I think the community is what tells the story about who we are. So the county, if you were to ask me who is King George County, if you would have asked me a year ago, I think what I would have told you was that this is a sophisticated bunch of people who just happen to live in a rural county. I can't tell you how many places I've gone to and you bump into somebody and they say, yeah, I worked on the ballistic missiles, the missile system. And you're like, I just ran into you at a food line and you have some type of significance to this country and what you contributed to it, right? And I love that about the county. But what I don't like is that those stories don't get told. And I think I've sort of taken that on as a mission of mine to sort of tell those stories about the community, because there are a lot of special people here. And I truly believe that the residents is what makes this county special. The county is not as fiscally responsible as it would be if it wasn't for the residents. We would not have the school system that we currently have now if it was not for the residents. I've always said that King George County is a blank canvas, and we really are being provided an opportunity to build it out the way that we want. But we need ideas and we also need input from the people in the community as well as our regional partners.
The blank canvas is a really beautiful idea and something to certainly think more about. This question is for Nick, and I think Tom, would be awesome if you could weigh in on this one as well. What role does entrepreneurship play in boosting the economic growth of King George County?
So for me, I would say, I mean, entrepreneurship is going to be how we truly grow. I think that, we start talking about tech commercialization in the county, and I think it truly is possible. I mean, over 500 patents are coming out of NSWC. There has to be at least one or two in there that we can capitalize on, right? It's just sort of getting that information into the right hands, getting that in front of the people who truly know what to do with it, and know how to scale a business and operate a business. Like I said, it's really all about collaboration and partnership. So I think that one day we could potentially see a business come out of King George County or out of the region in general, that gets on that Forbes list, but just given the type of stuff that they're working on, I think that is definitely a possibility, and it'll be homegrown here. Hopefully, they'll choose to stay here and expand, and we'll have one of those major headquarters, just simply off of some type of spinoff from DoD. And this isn't a wild concept. This is something that we've seen happen, on the West Coast when you start talking about Stanford University and what they were able to do. I think somebody just set up a tech park right outside of a base and right outside of a university, and the commercialization started to come off of that. And then boom, you got you essentially got a Silicon Valley. And I'm not saying that King George is going to be that. What I'm just saying is that it's possible, and I think we really need to open our minds to that and take that serious. So I think it's the future as far as entrepreneurship goes.
Great. Tom?
I love the term homegrown that Nick just used. I'm a huge believer that when you think about sustainable economic growth, that comes much more through things that start in a place and then grow in a place. Like once you plant a root of something new, it's hard to uproot that and move it to somewhere else. There's an awful lot of economic development historically that's focused on how do we get some industry to move here. And usually what we see is that sometimes that's long-term sustainable growth, but oftentimes that's we're going to move here because there was a big incentive. And then as soon as that incentive runs out, we go to whoever's offering the next best deal, and things kind of move around. But companies that start in a place can tend to have a loyalty to the place. And so efforts that are focused on entrepreneurship and kind of new things, I think are, have a high probability of success. Now that growth doesn't happen from nothing, right? You need food and ingredients and nutrients and fertilizer and so on. And at least as someone who is not from this region originally, looking at the assets that were listed in that strengths box, and particularly Dahlgren that Nick just described, that makes perfect logical sense. Alan, maybe I'll ask over to you from your perspective. I mean, what is the attitude of spinning things out and kind of having a multiplier effect of all the great work that's already happening on the base?
Right, Tom. Well, that's what we talk about when we talk about an ecosystem in an area, right? It's not a one-sided construct. We can have all the great ideas, but we need a venue by which then to get those ideas out. Nick is familiar with the Dahlgren decon story. I mean, that's basically we developed a decontamination procedure, if you will, and it was patented. Now, the U.S. government is not in the production business. We are in the idea business, the innovation business, if you will. So those patents, when we get them, our chief technology office is charged with doing the patent transfer, the tech transfer, if you will, to get those patents into the hands of somebody that then can take that, get a production facility. And I believe, Nick, the Dahlgren Decon built their facility in, I think, in Stafford County, right? So it's again a two-way street in the ecosystem in which we've got to have a way to get those, as Nick said, those patents out into the community, out into the businesses, out into the right areas, which then can set up production facilities, and of course that creates jobs and economic stability in the area. And all of this is done in collaboration with all of us. That's why I think it's great that we're talking. We participated in the Fredericksburg Regional Alliance event a few weeks ago. If we hadn't been in this pandemic, we'd been doing a lot more of this. But I'm glad we're able to at least do this virtually so that we can come out of this, we can meet more in person. you know, a lot of this stuff comes down to serendipity, right? You happen to meet somebody in an event like this, and you're able to connect the dots between the person who's got the idea and the person who's got the production, and boom, you make that connection, and then suddenly things take off. So yeah, definitely a two-way street, and collaboration is key.
And Amber, if I could add one more comment, because I 100% agree with the serendipity comment. And serendipity, in my experience, happens in coffee shops. It happens at breweries. It happens in co-working spaces. So there is something about creating that town square that Ian mentions, creating that point where people just, you run into each other, you get to know each other, and someone makes a comment and it sparks an idea. A lot of invention and innovation is accidental, but you can be very purposeful in building the things that increase your probability of those serendipitous moments.
Absolutely. So we did have one question come in. Alan, this one is for you. They're interested to hear how Dahlgren positions King George as you recruit talent, and what are the key points that excites people to come from other places to come and work at Dahlgren?
You cut out in the first part of the question there.
Sure, no worries. They are interested to hear how Dahlgren positions King George as you recruit talent, and what are the key points that excites people to come from other places to work at Dahlgren?
You know, I think, and it's actually something that we talked about here a few months back. Yeah, you know, I think a big draw is once the work that you're doing. I mean, as Nick pointed out, you're doing work in the interests of the national defense. I mean, that's it's a pretty big deal, right? It's the challenge, and again, that's why I spoke about the STEM. I think STEM is critical in the workforce development, because you're attracting the K through 12 group into the science and technology areas. And again, the big draw is look at the work we're doing, right? Whether it's lasers, hypervelocity projectile, you've heard about railgun in the media, even the 16-inch guns, it all ties back into the national defense. And I know, some of our younger engineers are just very excited that they're able to work on these programs that have such significant in the world, right? So that is a big draw. We also, I would actually like to move to King George County, but got to wait for the kids to get out of high school before I can move. I think another thing that people like about the area is it's kind of got that, it has that small town feel, but you can get to Lowe's and Home Depot and everywhere else, right? So you're just far enough outside of the hustle and bustle, but you can get to it when you want to go see something. So I think that's another area that's good. And we do recruit from across the country and from around the area. So we do get a lot of people come into the area, move into the area. I think we're at just under 1,000 of our employees actually live in King George. That's the largest concentration, and the others are split out in Fredericksburg City, Prince William, Stafford County, Caroline, Spotsylvania, Westmoreland, etc. But King George by far has the largest amount. So, I think as everybody else has said, and as the community members who've spoken tonight have said, I think all the things that you were talking about, and we go back to serendipity, and Tom, I like your comment because our technical director talks about that, right? If we had a coffee shop, or we had this cafeteria, not cafeteria, but kind of this area where scientists and engineers could kind of mingle, yes, while you're having coffee, and just start talking about things. It's interesting how many ideas are born on bar napkins, right? You've got that famous the famous bar napkin thing, right? But it's true, because people are in a more relaxed atmosphere. They're kind of more talkative. The ideas are kind of flowing. And I think that would be that's going to be a big thing to add in the area. I mean, we're very interested to see those kind of amenities come to the county, because again, we think that will help with workforce retention and development as well.
That's a great answer. And we have one more question for you, Alan, so don't take yourself back on mute yet. Mark would like to know, is there a mechanism for the tech sharing between Dahlgren and local, in parentheses, maybe down to Richmond, commercial and public innovators?
Yeah, well, that's the ecosystem I'm talking about, right? We have a chief technology office, and their main charge is the tech transfer to local entities. We have a small business director who's looking to bring in small business. And in fact, I was talking to him the other day, and we've had a significant amount of our work goes to small business. So he's doing a fantastic job being able to make those links and get those folks to come into the fence line to work with us. So there are multiple venues by which to do that. So
Excellent. Curry, you have a question?
No, I actually have a couple of comments that Nick will allow me to make a few.
Go ahead.
Allow it, sir.
Thanks so much, Nick.
You're welcome.
A couple of things, Tom. I don't think it's an either or on recruiting businesses or growing businesses. Virginia is not a high tax incentive state. We're not known as a big incentive state. Our region does not typically commute or try to recruit companies that are shopping for incentives. They're mostly here because of the quality of the workforce. That is the number one thing that we work off of. So I don't think it's an either or. I think recruitment is a piece, but it's not the whole piece. And we can't spend all of our time talking about it. Alan has got a very good point on tech transfer. As he knows, Nick and I have been working with his chief technology officer on trying to set up an ongoing system of tech commercialization. And we've been in discussions with the University of Virginia, with George Mason, with the Virginia Center for Innovative Technology. We'd probably be further along were it not for COVID. But the relationship that we've had with the base is excellent. They're engaged, we're engaged, and we've got some interesting partners who want to come to the table on that. So, but it's long term. This is not something that happens overnight. Dahlgren Decon, Alan, I guess, was 10 years in the R&D phase to even create the product. Yes, it was licensed to a group, but they initially did not set up operations here. They were manufacturing in Northern Virginia and Chantilly, but they outstripped production, and that's why they moved to Stafford County. And they're about to double again in their size. So it's kind of an all-in thing. Something that Ian said that struck me as interesting. Yes, you do not have a natural Main Street. That's both good and bad. Go pick a place, make a place. Just the county just decide this is going to be our Main Street and create it there. It can be the parking lot at Mary Washington if you want, but just pick one and really decide that that's going to be your event space, your mixing space. Do it behind the Starbucks at Walmart. I mean, you've got some marvelous assets in King George County. And I've watched some counties in Southside and Southwest Virginia who, yes, they have main streets, but they're dead. There's nothing there anymore because the population has moved out. You have the population, so just create a space, make a space, pick one. And that would be my advice to you all, is just pick a space and turn it into your main street.
Only it were that easy. From your lips to heaven's ears, Curry.
Well, yeah, and I'm a prophet outside of my own household, Ian.
Okay.
So I don't, first of all, Curry, thank you for the comment. I did not mean to say that recruiting is bad per se. Absolutely. It needs to be part of a larger economic portfolio. Unfortunately, there are particularly some smaller communities that kind of went all in on attracting a big factory or a big manufacturer or somebody that then a few years later left. And so that was really what I was referring to.
Totally agree, Tom.
Yep,
Totally agree.
Yeah,
You can't be elephant hunting. You've got to go for what you can get.
Yeah.
And what works within the ecosystem you're trying to create. You're absolutely right.
And I'm glad you mentioned talent as well, because when we hear people that have some concern or kind of interested in maybe working in a smaller community, they see all these benefits, but have some concern. One of the biggest concerns historically that we hear is, if I'm very successful and start to grow and scale, where am I going to find talent? There's not enough people. And that's where, again, we go back to, in today's day and age, if that right digital infrastructure is in place, that's not as important. You do find people naturally like to work at the office and, and at the headquarters, and that'll bring more people into a community. But if you have the right infrastructure, people can work from anywhere, and that talent argument is going to be less important going forward, I believe, which makes it even more amenable to starting your business in that place that you really want to live versus maybe in that city you feel like you have to be in.
Absolutely. And as Nick is aware, we had 5 site location consultants visit the region for 2 days. Nick, what was it, 3 weeks ago? And we spent the entire time talking about workforce and workforce engines and about the University of Mary Washington, the community college system, the public school system. We didn't have the first discussion about sites with them. It was all about workforce, and that's going to be the competitive advantage going forward. And how do we capitalize on it?
100%. Thanks. I think we're starting to wind down towards our promised end time. Amber, do we have any other questions in the queue before we wrap?
Not in the queue, but we do have a question that we'd love to ask the audience. So guys, bear with me. If anyone in the audience has considered starting or expanding a business in King George and has had reservations about it due to local conditions here, can you use one of the reactions buttons? We'd love to see what that looks like. Caroline, our wonderful events and operations manager and the woman behind this event who made our SWOT happen, says don't be shy.
I see a thumbs up from Mark Nichols. Is that what you meant by the reactions button? You're trying to look at how many people have actually done this?
Absolutely.
Cool. So I see at least one. I can't see everybody on my screen all at one time, actually, which is a bit of a challenge.
It looks like that. And for those of you that haven't, obviously it's a choice about what you want to do, but was there a reason why you wouldn't consider starting something in King George?
Yeah, I see another thumbs up from Vaughn.
Yep. Okay. Well, it was good data. Guys, like Tom said, we're about to wrap up the event, so just want to give you another minute to answer or ask any questions that you might have to our amazing panelists before we say goodnight for the evening.
And I'll remind anyone, I know that if you'd like to reach out to us, you can find us at riot.org or to me directly. I'm at tom@riot.org. I think Nick and Ian are both very accessible for any follow-on thoughts, any follow-on questions. I'll make a quick plug if you're in the region next week. As part of kind of some of the broader things that we're doing with Stafford County and the greater region, RIoT is running a 2-day customer discovery workshop. And what that means is that we're interested in working with small businesses that are trying to look at, how is it that I really validate a market? So if you have that idea for a business and you're trying to figure out, is that really a business I should go forward with or not? We do have a few seats left in that program. It's a completely free program. It runs from 3:30 to 6:30 next Wednesday afternoon and Thursday afternoon. And you can find the information to register for that on the meetup site. If you look for RIoT Virginia, you'll find our meetup. And I think Caroline Griffin has just posted the links into the register as well. Again, it's a free program that's being provided by Stafford. RIoT is hosting. If you're in an established business trying to figure out how might I pivot because of COVID or other reasons, it's also a great program for you to take a look at there, and we'd love to have anyone who can join. With that though, Nick, Ian, Alan, thank you again. Amber, Caroline, all the folks that work behind the scenes, and most importantly, thanks to everyone who took the time to join us online and give you your comments today. We will be in touch either directly or through our partners in King George and Stafford in days to come. So thanks again. Thank you, Nick. Any closing remarks you want to make?
Yep, just really quick. I just want to thank everybody who participated. I took a little number down when we started. I think we had about 47 folks. We still have 38 on. I'm just so impressed that that we were able to keep you guys' attention for so long and that you guys were interested in the conversation. It sort of shows me that you guys care about the county as much as I do, as much as Ian does. And I think that, you know, as long as you guys see the opportunity here in the county as well as the region, King George is going to be okay. So I implore you guys to reach out to me if you have ideas, if you have policy changes that you want to see, if you want to see the county look into something else or try to pivot to something else. I'm all ears, and I'm pretty sure we can try to find a solution or at least try to explore it for you. So I have an open door, so please come talk to me. Thank you guys. I really want to thank Amber, Caroline, Catherine, you guys, and Lindsay as well on the Stafford team. You guys were great to work with. So structured, so on point, so timely. I definitely learned some things working with you guys. So thank you guys again.
Absolutely. Take care, everybody.
Thanks, Nick. Take care,
Great.
everyone.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
everyone. Bye.
Bye-bye.